Houston Methodist Sugar Land Hospital, and also full-time pastor of the Burmese congregation in Houston.
Great, welcome. Would you like to share?
I'm Claudia Mann, and I teach English as a second language to beginners at Safely Home Refugee Ministry in Las Vegas.
Great.
Susan Odom with Exodus World Service. I'm the PowerPoint assistant today. I hope not to mess it up.
Hi, my name is Sue Horgan, and my grandfather, by way of England, was Frederick Joseph Hatters I. He made his way to the U.S. as an adult and married Mildred Hallahan by way of Boston. They had, welcome, they had 2 children. My father, Frederick Joseph Hatters II, and my Aunt Evelyn. Frederick grew up in Boston, my dad, and he eventually married my mother, Karen Younglove, by way of Green Bay, Wisconsin. They had 5 children, so I have 4 brothers and myself. My oldest brother is Frederick Joseph Hatters III, and he and his wife, Michelle, live in Pensacola, Florida, and they have 2 daughters. I have 4 children, 3 daughters and 1 son. My son's name is Matthew. I'll address that introduction in just a bit. The description of today's table talk indicates that we're going to be discussing materials used to educate volunteers for success in serving refugees. No matter what your role in refugee ministry is, it's clear to me that all of us have an impact in one way or another on volunteers. I mobilize the church, like several of you, to serve. So I build awareness of refugee ministries, and I onboard volunteers. Case managers might work directly in the field with volunteers, and even those of you in management or executive positions impact volunteers through your communications, through marketing, and even website content, right? In the nonprofit sector, we know volunteers are essential. They're useful, they're helpful, they make life easier. But when you're talking about volunteers in refugee ministry, you're talking about much more than that. Because we know that refugees have lost family members, friendships, and so often self-worth. So when volunteers serve refugees and a transformational relationship occurs, it allows refugees to have hope and courage for their future. Like Susan always says, refugees don't just need a home, they need a place to belong. They need relationships and human connection. Volunteers provide that. So in our ministry, volunteers are essential. So here lies the challenge of taking volunteers on an adventure that motivates them to continue serving. Introducing them often to an unfamiliar place and making it a journey that they want to repeat again and again, and then allowing them to have enough trust in us to increase their capacity to want to serve us in other ways as well, to keep volunteers coming back to us. That said, how can we share with each other today so that we're all able to walk away from our time together with some new ideas or information to share? I've thought very intentionally about this, somewhat unnerved by it all as well, because I'm sure all our language is very much similar, because we're all in refugee ministry together, right? So I'm hoping through presentations and examples of techniques that we use, that at the very least, you'll have some stories or possibilities for training volunteers in your back pocket to walk away with. As partners in refugee ministry, I'm excited to learn from you guys as well. So we'll have plenty of opportunity for that later. We need to share with each other and learn from each other. The introduction that I presented of myself just a few minutes ago was an example of how to help volunteers learn about refugees. This introduction is one that I use when I'm talking with a volunteer on how conversations with refugees might be much different from what they view a typical conversation would be. Refugees often view their cultures and their geography and their lineage way more valuable than we do here in the States. So their introductions of each other and of themselves is going to be much different. And so it only makes sense that our visual lens is different than most refugees. Even when we feel as if we're talking about the same thing, we might have a completely different understanding of that particular topic. So no matter what the goal of the volunteer opportunity is, whether volunteers are delivering material goods, helping with ESL, transporting to doctor's appointments, or spending time to help refugees acclimate into their new communities, their new surroundings, our hope, my hope is that these encounters lead to transformation, mutually beneficial relationships. Right now, volunteers want some clarity of the refugee crisis, right? And as well as some enlightenment as to who refugees really are. So providing information right up front that allows a volunteer to help me clearly understand refugees is imperative. I'm not going to start talking about the facts and statistics. You all know that better than I do, and we heard the latest this morning at our plenary session, right? But I do want to share some tangible examples that I use when I train volunteers at the organization that we work for. So first of all, I want to share with you our version of the refugee journey. The flight to freedom. Just in case you're in need of a resource for providing some clarity on how a refugee might arrive and the process that they take. I'm not going to say anything more about it because you can read it for yourself, and I want to make sure we have enough time to cover everything else that we're going to go over. So the next thing I want to share with you is the pen and paper simulation, which is very much similar to the Run for Your Life simulation that we're all going to be experiencing on a grander level later. But for right now, if everybody could just take a blank piece of paper. Does anyone need a writing utensil? Back there, some of those to share as well. I'm just going to go ahead and read for you from a script, and you'll follow along just as if you were volunteers being trained for refugee ministry. Everybody ready? You're about to become a refugee. You have just a few minutes to prepare for an unknown journey, an unknown destination. The only thing you'll know for sure is that you're never going to come back to the home where you are right now. Trucks will be coming shortly to take you and your neighbors down to the water, where hopefully there'll be a boat waiting for you. Your immediate task is to pack your bag for your journey. You have just a couple minutes. Right now, on your paper, mark your papers 1 to 10 and write down 10 items that you're going to be bringing. And all of a sudden, I'm going to become very frantic and I'm going to keep talking because when a refugee is deciding what they're going to take on their journey to an unknown destination, there's probably no electricity or the lights are flickering. They hear bombs going off in the distance. They're very distracted. They're probably crying. Their kids are crying. There's really no time to make a list as if we're going on vacation and have opportunity to come back to our beautiful home that we worked all our life to pay for. It's a much different scenario, one that we haven't been in before. So we don't really know what it's like for a refugee, but we're trying to feel what it's like. And how can you concentrate and make accurate assessment of what you want to bring. And if you say clothes, that's really one item. So clothes means one pair of jeans. If you want to bring jeans and a pair of shoes, then that's 2 items. You can only bring what you can carry. Your time's up. The truck is here early. The truck is here and ready to take you and your neighbors down to the coast, so nothing more can be added to your bag. You board the truck. You're on your way. Take a last look back at the home you're leaving behind. Try to visualize it. The road is rough and the driver doesn't seem to be too careful. He almost loses control around a curve and one person's bag falls off the truck. Within your groups, within your tables. It's the bag belonging to the oldest in your group. So right now, figure out quickly who the oldest person in your group is.
It's got young
The driver doesn't hear your calls to stop, and a bag is left far behind. This person has lost everything they own and should now cross everything off their list. So the oldest person, scratch everything off your list. The rest of you in your group should help by offering things from your bag. The person who has lost everything can accept up to 5 items. Right now as a group, if you want to offer some of your items to the person who has lost everything, go ahead. Talk amongst yourself and amend your list.
So you cross out.
Well, I bought some extra shirts for my family. You could have one of them.
Between us.
He can only have 5.
He can only
a lot of
have
things
5.
with t-shirts.
Keep in mind that you're in the role of a refugee, so you're really not having fun. This is a very serious moment. Everybody's still frantic. You're trying to figure out how you're going to be helping others.
It's okay.
I brought some food. I'm not using my knife very much, just you probably know better how to use it. So
You're better off than started. Okay, your time is up. No more offers can be accepted. The truck is going more slowly and a strange noise is coming from the engine. Finally, the engine dies and the truck rolls to a halt. It can't be fixed. There's nothing to fix it with. You have to get out and walk. Your bag is too heavy. Reduce the weight by removing the heaviest item. If you desperately want to keep the heaviest item, then you can remove any number of items that would make up that same weight. Quickly amend your list right now. Your time is up and you struggle on. The youngest person in your group falls into a ditch and is injured. Find out who the youngest person in your group is right now. Okay, this person can't continue without your help and can carry only the 5 lightest items in his or her bag. The rest of you can help carry the contents, but remember that no one can have more than 10 items. Anything that no one is able to carry is left far behind. Go ahead and amend your list right now accordingly.
So this time, I can only carry the 5 lightest items. I need to get rid of my
I have these guys.
Okay, your time is up. You continue on, and at last you reach the coast. There are boats on the wharf, but you have to bribe the harbor master to let you on board. You must give him the 4 most valuable items that you have between you and your group. Discuss right now which are the 4 most valuable items in your group and amend your list accordingly.
I could offer something.
Probably better than the lighter.
I think it's not.
I have money.
There was 4 items in this.
Oh, we have
4 between us. 4 between us.
Come on, you have
So I got the glasses and passport.
A pair of pants, a shirt, a pair of shoes.
I think there's.
How many items are we getting for?
4 among your group.
Okay.
Cross off right now, I think. We'll get
He's gonna be the only one in his team who arrives.
Her shoes are really
We'll arrive in
Probably.
blanket.
That's
more valuable.
Very
I'm not sure that's gonna.
Okay, your time is up. You continue on and at last you reach the coast. There's boats on the sorry. Your time's up, you board the boat, but now the captain says there's too much baggage. It has to be reduced to a total of 30 items in your group before the boat will sail. Together with your fellow passengers, discuss what is to be left behind. You can only have 30 items in your group. We're good.
We gotta keep the food and water.
Unfortunately, you're a small group.
We got Bible, water, you can add some more.
We were about to just give them
Well,
a
I'm wondering
stop.
how many do you have? Less than one place.
We do.
Jonah.
Yeah, what, you've got 2 more?
Yeah.
What are you doing for the
I'm Ryan.
Yeah.
How do you say it? Tom. Yeah.
Okay. Your time is up. Okay. Your time is up and the boat sails. Conditions on the boat are very crowded and almost everyone throws up. A wave swamps the boat. You manage to save your baggage, but anything likely to be affected by water is ruined. You have just a minute to check the contents of your bag and mark off anything that can be ruined by water.
No, just what we did.
We've got all of our papers.
What my library?
Why didn't you bring your birth certificate?
Okay, your time
I mean,
is
it
up.
would be, I would pay my birth.
You sail on, but now your boat is attacked by pirates who want to take all your valuables. Produce all your valuables or likely they will kill you. They are very angry, and if they don't get at least 1 item from each passenger, you don't know what they're going to do. Right now, amend your list.
You still have your
Chances are. Yes, that's one.
Yeah, they would. I can give you my blanket.
Well,
Is
they'd rather have a shirt.
shoes?
Yeah, they'll have a shirt.
Chances are we got on our and we didn't have it on the list. and we had it on.
I'll go with that.
So I think they would watch for any.
What is it?
Hey, girls.
Okay, your time's up. The pirates have gone now, and at last land decided. You come into port, you disembark with what little luggage you have left. You're in a safe country, perhaps life will be better, but remember, you have no income, you have no roof over your head, and you don't speak the language or know the culture of the people around you. So, because we're learning how to take things away from this table talk, this is an opportunity that you can share with your volunteers. I put that out there for you to take one. There's a list of debrief questions that you can work with your volunteers to talk about how it felt when they had to pack a bag, how did they feel when they left the place knowing they would never come back, how did it feel to lose your belongings on the way. All these things that refugees actually go through on a very, very small level. They will learn the reality of what refugees go through on their way to a safer place. Then I typically share a story or something that can help them understand the process even more. The one I typically use is when the media caught hold of the Syrian baby washing up on shore, right? We're reaching almost 2 years, I believe, in September. When the media caught hold of that image, it was then that the word refugee really became a common term around the dinner table, right? Prior to that, the word was clumped up within a lot of other terms and not really clearly understood by common people just in our communities. So I share that, and I really talk about how when the media interviewed the dad, we heard for ourselves from a refugee that he gave his last $300 to someone because they promised him there would be a boat waiting for him. But when he got to the shore, it was a rubber raft. And then the boat only got a mile or two out into the water when it took on water and capsized, and his wife and 2 children perished. It was that baby. So the reality of this run for your life simulation, pen and paper simulation, is very real. I had been reading this probably for 10 years or so before that clip we saw on TV. And I would read it and I would share with volunteers knowing that, yeah, it's reality. But even I had a reality check when I heard that refugees say those very words that we have in that simulation. So that's an example of how to share about the journey of a refugee. Now let's tackle cultural communication, because that could be different on a lot of different levels as well. Talking about culture and cross-cultural communication is a big part of volunteer training. We, like you, we want volunteers to feel prepared, so we plant enough seeds so that their relationships and experience with refugees grow. Then, when they're feeling really good about volunteering, hopefully they're feeling success and a desire to continue on, right? Providing opportunities to put a volunteer in moments of the refugee journey helps to equip them to continue growth within these relationships. So, quickly, because I want to have more than enough time to share your ideas together, there's blank pieces of paper on the table. Break up into partners. Just get very close. You two very close together, you two very close together. You need 1 piece of paper and 1 pen. Susan, do you mind sharing this so there's an even number?
Sure.
Partners, 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 partners. Perfect. Great. 1 piece of paper and 1 writing utensil for each partner. So you're going to get very, very close to each other. And you're going, 1 person pick up, so if everybody can look up here for a minute. Susan is holding this pen. Her partner is going to grab hold of it, and they're actually going to work together as a team. So put your hand on her hand. No talking for this activity. I do this with middle school and high school. The room is silent. I do this with adults, and you hear. Okay. So no talking and no looking at each other. Just follow my simple instructions. Right now, get ready. You have 1 piece of paper with your partner. Hold on to the pen. And follow my simple instructions without looking or talking to each other. Are you ready? Draw a picture of a house. Shh. You can look at your paper, you just can't look at each other. stop, no talking, turn your paper over. Same thing, one utensil, work together, no talking, no looking at each other. Draw a picture of a house from a different country. No looking at each other, Susan. Okay, pencils down, turn your page over. So how was the first experience when I said draw a picture of a house? How did that make you feel? Or how was your experience, rather?
Pretty comfortable.
Pretty comfortable?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because we both drew it the same way the other would have drawn it.
Okay,
Not for us.
okay. We'll come back to that. So for the most part, because we're all from the same culture, in our culture, when you're about 3 or 4 years old, your parents, your caregivers, start working with you and teaching you how to draw a house. We draw a square, not even looking at your papers, I'm assuming that's what it looks like. Then you draw little squares, you might have a tree, you draw a triangle for a roof. And for the most part, typically, in our culture, that's what houses look like. It's pretty representative. So when we turn the page over and I said, draw a picture of a house from a different country, how was that experience?
I had no idea where
Say again?
I had no idea where she was going with it.
Right.
Because I just let him run with it.
Well, then you weren't working as a team. Okay? So it was more difficult, right?
Yeah.
So this is a really good way for volunteers to understand that even when they're talking about something that's so familiar to them, the refugees' vision might be much different than what they're thinking it is, right? And cross-cultural communication can be hard. So taking away assumptions and really trying to understand each other is really important in the training for volunteers to make those times of misunderstanding go really smoothly. Just planting the seeds with volunteers, right? Okay, so that is draw a house activity.
Did that turn it too late?
That's okay.
Okay.
So a good example of that is we can look at this and see lumber, right? And if you say, well, what is lumber used for? Oftentimes your response is going to be, it's going to be to build houses. That's what we do. But someone from Burma might look at that and say, I have no idea what that is. What is that even? But if you show them some thatch or some grass, that will be more familiar to them, and that is what they will be thinking of how to build a house. That's the material that they might use. Or from Papua New Guinea. That was Laura Logan's little picture she gave me. So we'll move on here. So culture is taught in many different ways. Another illustration I like to use is a theory by Mueller and Thomas. It's called The Peach and the Coconut. Is anybody familiar with The Peach and the Coconut? Yay! Okay, so metaphors are kind of fun sometimes. So here we go. Some people, when they're teaching about different cultures, they might compare Western, non-Western. They might say closure, non-closure societies, right? But this is a funner way to give examples of different cultures. So, in a culture that most refugees are probably from, they will be more coconut, right? They have a thin, hard shell that takes probably a couple interactions before you can get inside the shell. When you first meet them, they might be more reserved. They might not be as forthcoming. They might not be willing to share as much as someone from a peach society like US culture. And I like to even narrow it down specifically to the culture that you're in. Because even in the US, cultures can be very different depending on community, state, climate, and all that kind of stuff. So I even say Chicago. Because in Chicago, we're very soft on the outside. We talk to people in the grocery store. We are welcoming. Hi, welcome to America. We're so glad you're here. A little bit of over-exuberance sometimes. That's not untypical for people from Chicago. People from other countries probably don't present themselves that way very often, right? But we also know that we can be friends with someone, we can work with someone for 20 years or more, and so we've been in relationship, we're at the meat, the soft fruit of it, right? But this inner stone, this very soft stone, is very, that's like our things we don't want to share. We might never open up. That's our private business. Maybe it's what we make, or maybe it's our political views, or maybe it's things that we've experienced in the past. So we're never really going to learn or share those personal experiences with other people. Whereas most other cultures, once you get inside this hard shell, you are now part of their family. You're part of their tribe. They're accepting you as they accept each other. And that's pretty important to understand when you're working with people. I see everybody shaking your heads, yes, right? Because volunteers from the US put value into their refugee friends, right? But they also go home and they know they have other things to do and other people to be with. But these folks are accepting you as part of their family. So the expectations might be different than we know them to be. So I like to use this analogy. I like to give the definition and descriptions that I just gave you when working with volunteers, and it seems to work. You can internalize the different cultures and expectations in this way. Questions?
Perfect.
Oh, thank you. I like encouragement. Okay. So
it's just so important, because I've had a Thai friend who just said, you know, you Americans, you come and you make great friends for 9 months and then you're gone and you never contact us ever again. You're just out of our lives. You don't really care. You just act like you do.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, right? And so this training is a way, how can we teach ourselves to be more conscious of that, and when we're giving of ourselves, really be in it for the long haul. And that's what we really want to do with volunteers, is build those mutually beneficial relationships so that you are becoming part of each other's families and friends, and really holding on to those relationships that are formed for both your sakes, not just for the refugees' sakes. Iceberg activity. Pretty common amongst cultural theories and stuff, but I wanted to point it out just in case you're not familiar with it. So if you talk about what culture is, we all know that it's learned, first of all, right? It's not innate. So if you write down, and I did this for sake of time already, you could ask your volunteers, what is culture? Give me some examples of what culture is. And they're going to say, well, it could be music, or it could be religion, it's systems, it's language, it's clothing, it's food. But if you look at all that and use the metaphor of a iceberg, knowing that culture is kind of a complex topic to discuss, it's not always easy, you can do it in this way. Because we know that an iceberg, how much can you see of an iceberg? Small amount, like 10%, right? So we might be able to see clothing and food, but we might not be able to see things that have a commonality with what you do see. We might see clothing that might be based on religious beliefs, right? And we might see, what else? The food that we eat is also indicative, oftentimes, of religion. So until you really get to know somebody, it's easy to draw assumptions, or it's easy to make judgments. But if you really try to understand the whole person and try to understand why people do things and really get to know them, then those assumptions are put aside, and that's when real relationships are being formed. Iceberg. Good? Questions? That actually went much faster than I anticipated. So that's just a few of the activities that we use from our educational materials. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through every possibility of engaging volunteers. However, broadly, I'd like to suggest a few ways how we move volunteers forward, because this is all about sustaining volunteers, not just having them come in for one experience, but how we build relationships with volunteers to build relationships with refugees, right? And then it's all of us working together as a team so that they feel valued and they want to move on within our organization. So providing other opportunities besides serving, right? We want to walk alongside our volunteers. So we not only want to engage them, we want to support them. What are some ways we can do that? We can provide opportunities to debrief from their experience. We all know that working with refugees is a wonderful blessing, that people are changed, that it's transformative, but we also know in reality that it's not always that easy, and that sometimes it's just hard. But having authentic conversation with volunteers, getting volunteers together, allowing them to process, to be honest and real with each other, with a facilitator, with guided questions. We've heard over and over again from volunteers how beneficial that is for them. Also giving volunteers opportunities to hear and learn about different ethnic backgrounds, different cultures of refugees, it seems to be really beneficial as well. So holding opportunities, inviting volunteers to come together. Again, they can get to know each other, like-minded people, the commonality of working with refugees, talk to each other about their experiences, maybe providing a movie night. God grew tired of this. Maybe having a Sudanese person come in and share their experience of being a refugee and viewing the music together, movie together. So really learning about that topic and that culture and hearing. That in itself can be pretty transformative for volunteers to really hear the voice of who these things happen to, right? In the same way, book clubs are might be a good idea to implement for volunteers who just really want to learn on a broad level what's going on. So now you've heard from me. I want to give you guys opportunity first to ask questions on what I've said, and then to share what you guys do that works so that we can have opportunity to learn from each other. And we've created some questions that we can pose to figure out as well.
It's just a comment. That just occurred to me that with the movie night and the book club, if you can start with a group and say, we're going to see a movie on, we're going to have refugees there to talk to us, or we're going to read a book, and at the end have a refugee. You know, that might be an interest starter. I hadn't considered that, so that's really cool.
Right, onboarding, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Building awareness, right? Kind of advocating, inviting others to share in and learn, and then sparking their interest to serve. It's beautiful.
If you have refugees who are courageous enough and have shared their story enough that it's not so traumatic for them to share that they're ready and they're strong enough,
Right.
and that can help. Because if you just send your volunteers out to meet somebody, sometimes people are,
Apprehensive, and with good reason.
not
I'm
ready,
not sure
not
I
ready
would
to
share.
share their story.
Right. Yeah.
It takes time to develop that openness.
Oh, absolutely. So the beauty of being in Chicago, we have a lot of refugees who have been here for years and years, and we have great relationships with some, right? So hopefully your newer cities that you're experiencing will grow into that opportunity as well. Because like we learned this morning, and in different the different table talk that I attended, refugees really want to give back. And that is a way that they can share and build awareness and help other people understand their fabric and outlook, right? And then you're building acceptance and allowing volunteers to really understand who they are. So on the next screen,
Questions?
I'm sorry, did I miss something?
No, did you want questions, you say?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
I shared in the pen and paper simulation that allows volunteers to experience on a small level their journey. Tomorrow you'll have an opportunity to experience on a bigger, more grander level, I'm assuming. I really don't know what they're doing, but it sounds like it's going to be great. So what are other activities or tools that help volunteers step into the shoes of refugees that you're familiar with?
Sports.
I shared our version of the Flight to Freedom. We didn't go over it, but what are some ways you convey the process in which refugees travel to a safer place? Together we talked and experienced the drawing of a house, how we both call this a house, but clearly see it very differently. So what are some metaphors or illustrations you use with volunteers when talking about cultural differences? Then we talked about how we can engage and be supportive of our volunteers because we want them to continue serving with us and we want to build relationships with them. So what are some ways that you provide opportunities for volunteers to debrief, reflect their experiences with refugees? And then you might have a wealth of information that I have not even tackled with you guys yet. So feel free to share a story or give examples of something from your organization, that your organization does to equip volunteers to serve refugees. So right now, in your groups, at your tables, you'll work with each other, come up with as many comments, stories, opportunities to share. Maybe if you target one person to be the spokesperson, even though we'll have open dialogue, and then we can hear from each other our reflections. Does that sound okay?
So we're doing the
We are
question
doing
number 5,
these questions.
right?
Yep.
Or all of them.
You're doing all of them, but you don't have to do all of them if that's not something that you guys want to discuss. So as a group, you can figure out which questions you want to tackle. Time is going to be of the essence, really, as we move forward. Yeah. We actually wrote these down for you too.
We have a similar representation kind of experience,
When I was,
but
one of the things that I've used before is a Muslim.
4 people that are really
Muslim
going to
groups.
continue.
Where you
4
have
things
a-
in your house that are really good. 4
Do you know who
skills
the
or solutions that you have.
Okay,
You
contact
bring
IUBs,
And
they have a brochure on it
either
that
has you rip up
gives you step by step
one,
how to live a Muslim.
or someone else comes and
And
rips
it's
it up.
for non-Muslim
Or
women.
it's done
Learning to
random,
reach
so it's
out to
almost
their-
unfair that some people have to keep everything kind of.
So those are resources we can probably find online.
It's more
Yes.
ripping
International Mission
some
Work
things
or
are
North American Mission Work.
I think it does help people. It's the stories, especially especially if it's somebody themselves looking to share.
Oh, that would be
That's my,
yeah. As long as they.
Yeah, feel it.
what time do you go to?
Usually one
Somebody
time
who's
a
friendly,
year.
saying,
Oh,
The purpose of the tea.
oh yeah, that's great. That's a half hour.
Right?
No, that's, yeah,
So we have
great.
teaching and working. I gathered with them to say, pray for us in the following way.
Right, so this is something that you did not to reach out
To me, you know, it's
Interesting,
the
huh?
first step as a volunteer.
Yeah, it's super interesting to me.
gray area.
Yes, yes. Because it was one of the things I found, and I'm sure too, that when people pray, a lot of times
Came
they'll
in
even
2005, 6, agencies are not aware what they
But if
need
you
and
have
what
a
they
message,
they just prepare a song, a stage, their assumption, they prepare food, I mean, cooking, utensils, everything is American. When they come, they cannot use, they cannot eat those things. So they just assume that they will eat everything we eat. And they don't eat, they cannot eat, they cannot cook, use all fat pans and things like that. So when we went in
15
here,
minutes to travel.
5 minutes,
15
then
minutes
we
to travel.
saw
So
bread,
that's what's But that's okay.
they said
We can
just
hold a
really
half hour and
use
then
it.
they can be
So
ready.
we took them to this show with like rice there for
Something that we are
things like that. For example, so to me it's number one success with outsource, but they need what they don't need, what they value, what they don't need, what they understand, what they don't outsourcing, learn from them first.
Yep. No,
Teaching them, asking them how much they know about here, and how
to put as a face on it, because it's an idea, it's American, it doesn't get real until
we
it's
made it a sensitivity, which means what they see, how they feel, what they see, what things they value, and how those understandings and the difference we have.
Yeah, I feel like,
Because I think that's the
finished our 2-year pilot,
key
there's a
point
lot of reflection
that we can
around our training and stuff.
find we
I
can
think,
connect.
we really,
It's the
I
same thing
appreciate
as a
some of the
chaplain, when I
concrete
go
examples,
to chaplain,
like
and every
something that we
patient with different cultures,
more
different people, and
we
even
do 2 6-hour
same
trainings
white
on 2
people,
Saturdays, so
reason,
it's
but
pretty
region,
intensive.
whatever.
For people
That's
to
like a different
participate.
culture.
That's
So
one thing
we
I
don't
really
assume,
like
we
about
just
Tucson
honestly
Refugee Street. It's also a simulation. Like
find out.
you see the bird, you know, the orange one, and you tear it up
It
into
says all about the sport.
Yeah.
No, no.
Yeah. Or things that are important to you, or people who are important to you.
From there, we find out what is their spiritual needs, something like that. So
Help me, I'm blanking out.
like that, what they are interested in.
roles that you play.
So that's a way they can connect, and then they open, as we said, their mind and can tell us, can tell good.
There's one of
I
them.
think that's
Anyway, I'd be happy to share with anybody, because I think it makes.
Was it
good
places?
assessment.
I'm trying to remember, because I've done that one too.
Yeah, so there's some combination of everyone at first, usually they have to choose one thing that they're gonna
Yeah, on their
put
way.
in the middle, and then they turn them
If the
upside
Burmese
down,
people,
sit down, and they have to select
talk
without looking,
about-
not knowing what they're losing. And then there's some like people walk around the room and
talk
take
about
things,
soccer, then
more
they-
from some
they-
people,
they-
less from others, and so it actually is, it's really interesting at the beginning, like kind of the awkwardness, almost like we were kind of chuckling over some of the things we were doing at this or whatever. And then it quickly goes to like people get into a place where they're really realizing, wow, you know, what is that like not knowing? And there are a couple of just very brief 2-sentence examples that go with the script. That I think help people internalize it. So that's a really good one.
So my
Use
goal
it too.
currently
Impactful. People sometimes say it's the best part of the training.
all the
Yeah, volunteer training. Yeah, as a way to identify.
and I think about that a lot because we have this list, you know, that the government says we have to provide XYZ things. One of them, for example, is a baking pan. In my head, I'm always thinking, okay, I've never seen anyone,
You
you know,
choose 2 people, and now the people who are diabetic and that kind of stuff,
coming
you have to
from
provide something.
never seem to need
But
it.
everybody
And I
else
guess
It's not the
doesn't
way
know
they-
what's going on.
we teach them.
And
But
randomly choose two
we just
people.
have this
They're
preset
invited to
list
come to a
thing.
table in front of them.
Yeah, maybe we
And
go
it's
to
teachers
the,
will
visit the apartment a few months later and it's sitting in some cabinet.
everything, so
We've never touched it.
everything. And they're really nice. And then everybody else has to sit on the floor. And they're given a bowl with rice, two pieces of fish,
Yeah.
and dried fish. And that's all.
If you have all 10, you know,
You start getting all
makes
kinds
it
of
more
stuff,
comfortable to
especially
be able to share.
then some new ones needed to fry.
our
Sometimes it was,
And then they don't need cheese, they don't need.
Oh, yeah.
sometimes it was frustrating for us because, especially when we were very, very busy, we
They've
had,
got
you know,
Let's
70, 80 people arrive in 1 month.
because they're also, there are a couple of.
I knew that I was frustrating to them and they were frustrating to me because people were trying to describe, no, I need this kind of pot.
Then it's like,
And I didn't even know what they were talking about, you know, because I don't know what they used to cook. And in my end, it's like, well, we gave you a pot. Like, what do you do?
everything.
What's the problem?
Right. But I knew there was a disconnect.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're like,
It's a
oh,
set
The
of
knowledge, like,
maybe it is when my refugee friend comes over.
So that's really helpful, I think, to
to
have
our house.
people in the middle
Maybe it's
can
because they see your stuff is their stuff.
talk to,
And they have a greater need than you.
help
And they
explain.
know you can
Whoa.
explain it. So
Really
they just
important.
kind of absorb
Because I
it.
knew the stories.
one
That
thing that
kind
we
of
haven't
thing.
really talked
And
much
That
about
wasn't
is
anyway,
um,
it's
how to,
getting down to, all we ask
we
you to do.
talked a little bit about developing trust with refugees. And like in my case,
But that's all
right
mine.
here, we
Yeah,
have
I've heard of it being done.
and
I
I
would think
recruit
you'd want to
volunteer,
facilitate that.
maybe
You
two
do,
volunteer
you do.
families who
And you don't want to
have
give young,
chemistry.
young people have a
Another
tendency
volunteer
to
here who wants to
over the
develop
food
a
house
relationship
plus.
with that.
It's really important.
Younger
I
adults,
developed
I'm talking about
trust.
students, young students, not college students, but the.
We have a
high
relationship.
school
Like that matters, like it can really.
Then I introduce them
The person who's sharing,
to
if
volunteers.
they just
I'd say
don't respond at all, which makes them feel like they don't believe me, or they like are just asking all these detailed follow-up questions of like, what type of day are you wearing? Like, are you implying it's my fault, or like, you know, like,
But then I
I
didn't
think
just do that.
that
I
we
also
have this one part
talking
of
to the
our training
refugee
that's like how to respond
to
to
make sure
suffering,
that
and it's basically like
the
what to
message
do and
that
don'ts,
their,
like what to
their
say
relationship
and what not to say, like whenever
Right, so
someone
this
shares
kind
with
of
you
role,
something that was very
serving as a liaison
One of the
between
things that we do on station
volunteers
like
is very difficult because
entering
you
into
have to
this
develop
like
trust
agree, like for what happened,
and then
like
foster
like
trust
righteous
Everything you
anger
do
that
is
this should not happen.
And that's one thing I'm really struggling
You know,
with.
even crying with them, like being
How
able to
to take
emotionally like
volunteers who
Is
want
everybody
to work with me,
you know, like being able to
Okay, cool, yeah.
or with refugees, how to,
not to
But we
how
do
to
like
foster
not where we just
do
that.
some
the main
of these
concept.
several things.
How do
A lot of
I
times they'll come here and
protect
and they don't answer
refugees
Give
that.
examples
from well-meaning,
Someone will share a very traumatic story.
poorly trained individuals? And how do I
and then
train
they'll start sharing something
or
from your
how do I
life.
protect the
And then
volunteer?
what just happened is that your refugee is like, no, this is like, actually what you just experienced is nothing like what I experienced. So like, it diminishes and it takes the focus from the person if it's, in a sense, if they're trying to destroy, they're reaching out where, you know, they're letting someone in. And so, right, and so the person needs to enter into that need and that relationship and not say, oh yeah, but let me tell you about me, you know? Yeah, I think it's important
Yeah,
to
thank you for sharing.
train volunteers so that.
Most of the time, we just go by right? And so it's like, but that doesn't.
It's like,
It's
it's
just
not
thinking
something
about
that
how do you take it to the next level.
that are very aware of those issues going on.
Did they not know how to research
Group settings, people
is there, problem X,
No,
getting
when
to
I work
what it
with the refugees in our
so that's
time,
what's
like this,
really
their job
helpful.
really isn't working.
And something we can kind of keep going back to with our
Right, my job,
volunteers and
as much as I'm in
reiterate those
this,
concepts.
in order to do that, really my job
I'm
is
so
more
sorry.
consumed by the volunteers.
You know, trying to focus on coordinating.
It's them I have to.
The lady that is in charge
I
of
think the
Central
more you
Central
just share it where you know the
she's
refugees
really
to
good
some degree
about
first
asking.
is closer to the
have a
model of
system that works
Jesus.
for them?
And he was going while he was training.
For example, my husband.
People from Burma
Sit
would
in the
say,
classroom
oh,
and
you had a nice
instruct
house.
or
And he
speak
always
straight
uses
from an
paper.
office. He led the way. And there were times when
That's
he
a
set
system
the
that works for
disciples
him,
off
so
to
he doesn't
do.
need it.
And they came back and were excited and
Unless you
said,
say,
so
shove it in the bag,
so
bring out
he gave them
chairs,
further instructions.
whatever.
But I think the
That's
fresher
working
we
for
are,
him.
the
He
more
knows
we
how to
stay
solve their
engaged,
problems, so that's
stay
not
involved.
something
As
that's
a
really
teacher.
Exactly, that's what my personal.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just thinking. I was like, how many cows does this woman work?
That's the kind, so that's the kind of, so it's not traumatic. It's
Nice.
Okay, so at this point, do we feel as if we have enough material to chat
Oh,
about?
we never talked about leave. Okay, meeting.
Okay.
Who's our spokesperson?
Sorry, I went to sleep and I don't have the questions back.
That's okay.
But
They have them and I have them. Yep,
Okay,
I got them right here.
I'll
They're
share
good.
some things that we do. One of the last questions was how do you one thing that we didn't have was we created a leader team of volunteers to like authority, you know, and responsibility. And also like having those leaders do one-on-ones with like the key volunteers like once a month. So they get that kind of like personal stuff. We also do like outreach like events per year, where we have like asylum seekers will share, or we'll have something that ties into like the mission, or it'll be like a cultural night.
Some of the ideas that we share.
Right, and so they're getting to experience some of that culture. Those are two of the leaders. Yeah, I used to work for Refugee. I quit Refugee Services to start asylum seekers. Moms because refugee resettlement agencies, they don't provide
Languages you speak
good asylum.
besides
So on average, asylum seekers in Texas for 2 years without work, and they're not qualified in here in Dallas, Fort Worth, 6
Not just what,
why? Okay, what are some other things that we need to do to train and to support volunteers?
US or North American culture to go into other people's cultures, because you can also reverse it and say, okay, this is what they're feeling from their side, they can take that one.
And in your Burmese
Yes,
church, do you
amen.
have,
Change
is
it
it
with
mostly
the foreign.
do you have any Korean?
That's also very strong. Sheree has Sheree Ray has
Many Burmese people.
The medium Burmese
Individualized.
4 or 5.
verses that you
In the 70, 80,000 that have come over in the last 10 years, are there very many Burmese, because I know they're the individual people group over there with the spouse.
Very few Burmese.
I've been to the
Mary,
but when I say that,
Kachin, all of them, Kachin, or
very smooth things, you expect people to
because the UN did not accept the Burmese as refugee.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, the majority.
that code, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, I know there's never gonna be enough time because we could just talk all day about our ministries, I'm sure. But, we need to wrap things up to be mindful of, where we need to be next. So, that said, did anybody give, great thought or have insight into what are other activities or tools that help volunteers step into the shoes of refugees? If you did, share with us.
We have a few ideas. I'll just run through them quickly.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, really resonated with the idea of the cross-cultural aspects being important. Several of us have different trainings that are part of our programs. We talked about a Muslim women's tea. There are some resources available through the International Mission Board that could be a springboard for maybe engaging volunteers with women in particular with Muslims. Some of you may have heard of the hunger meal, where it's a more extended simulation where you have a group of people in a room one table is treated very well with the fine dining, down to varying levels, down to a group that is just given rice in their hands. And so, experiencing the emotions of that and debriefing that together, that's also has stuff available online. Several of us have done another loss simulation exercise where you take a piece of paper and fold it into 16 pieces. I think maybe others of you know it too, and you have to write down, volunteers would write on one item on each slip of paper for people that matter to them, for things that matter to them, for roles they play in their lives, and then we were blanking out on the fourth category, but there's a script similar to what you were doing before, where you read through, at first people have to choose one item from each pile. What's the fourth thing?
Roles that you play.
Roles.
Father, worker,
Yeah.
whatever else.
I said roles.
Did you? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
So,
Roles, items,
items,
People.
people.
And
the
skills that you have.
Skills you have, that's it, skills.
Yeah.
And so you choose one thing, everyone chooses one thing to put in the middle, then they flip their piles over, and they have to lose one thing without knowing what it is.
Okay.
And then some, a couple people walking around the room taking from people, they take more from some people, less from others. You still don't necessarily know what you lost. So as you go through the script, people have that sort of, vicarious experience of
Do you know
they can discuss.
where that's available? Because I have a copy, but I have no source.
We've got it from Tucson Refugee Ministry. They did have it on their website, so I don't know if it's still there, but it's out there. Yeah.
What's it called? 16?
Loss simulation exercise is what we call it. I have the file on my laptop right here, so if you want it and want to just give me your email quick, I'd be happy to send it to you.
Or you could post it on that Slack.
Oh yeah, I'll do that. See,
Yeah.
this is why you have text
Yeah,
that
please
people
do.
in the room.
Yeah.
There's a small group study through When Helping Hurts, that book that is really good about talking about the right kind of giving and being empowering. A couple of books that are helpful, Mini Skirts, Mothers and Muslims, Foreign to Familiar, again, just cross-cultural resources that people can access. Yeah, and then one good point also about the question, do people, the refugee family that someone might be working with, do they have a system that works for them? So rather than trying to go in and improve or do something the way we would do it or whatever, asking that question before interfering in a matter that is, so, yes.
And also in regards to sharing everything that's said right now, this table talk, as all table talks are recorded and they're going to post them, whether it's on the Facebook page or I don't know where it's going to be posted, but you'll be able to re-listen if you care to. So if you want to share websites or what have you, that might be a good opportunity as well. Anybody have any other reflections or ideas on the first question?
I kind of information dumped, sorry about that.
No, we appreciate it. Thank you for your insights. Share some ways you convey the process in which refugees travel to a safer place. Had any of you seen the one I did? No? Versions of it? Anything to build on that would have been different than what you experienced? Does anybody do anything different to help their volunteers understand the journey?
Sorry.
Go over it.
There's a video, and I don't even remember where I came across it, but it was actually put out. Jay Johnson at the time was sort of the voiceover for it. It came out around the Syrian refugee crisis, and it did a really good job in 3 or 4 minutes of sort of saying what is the refugee process, and then also sort of speaking to security concerns, very sort of concisely. I don't remember. I'll try and post it on Slack as well. But it's a really good video for sort of speaking to concerns and the process in a very quick and concise way.
Okay.
And so I've used that in a lot of presentations, and it tends to, I think it sort of blocks some of the questions that come with around concerns of safety.
What's it
And
called?
just educating people on facts, right?
I will. Let me find it. I have it on my computer. So I'll
And do
flip
you
it.
have something to share as well?
Oh, just that, one theme that our table kept coming back to was that people need to hear the stories from the person who it actually happened to. That like, you know, we can put ourselves through a simulation of questions, imagining ourselves, but like there's something different that happens whenever you're looking across the table from someone who actually went through this and they're sharing with you, and there's a sense of compassion that wells up on you and a desire to do something, you know, and that goes further than almost any other icebreaker or whatever, you know, we can come up with. That has to be a critical part of it. I think, just last thing on that. I think that, so my first entry into the kind of the refugee world was at a place that did mental health care for refugees and asylum seekers, and they so elevated the privacy of these people that they would never ask them their stories, never ask them to share, you know, anything like that. But I've really seen that that's not necessarily, yes, you need to be cautious, you need to make sure people are prepared to handle, like, and respond to that well, but also, when an asylum seeker or refugee is ready, it can be healing for them to express themselves and to give back, to help the greater community like understand what people go through, and to give them a platform and a voice to share. So I think that is like needs to be a critical part of refugee ministry well done, and to train volunteers.
I can't find it right now, but there was an excellent video out there where somewhere in California, the refugee crisis actually happens to them, and the roles are reversed, and they're crossing the border into Mexico and fleeing the bombing in LA or wherever it was, and what they go through as they cross over, and how she gets separated from her mother. It's just gripping. I wish I could
think
remember
it's
the name
Alicia
of it.
Keys.
What's
Alicia
it?
Keys created that video, I believe. Yeah. It was very compelling.
They started out in her kitchen with her daughter. Is
Yeah.
that what you're thinking? Yeah.
Can you post that one on Slack too?
Yeah, it's called Let Me In.
Let me in, okay.
It came up just like that, Let Me In, when I typed in Alicia Keys.
Go ahead and play it for a second. Yep, that's it. Okay. What are some ways that you provide opportunities for volunteers to debrief, reflect on their experiences with refugees? Does anybody do anything or have any insights or ideas? A lot of it is just brainstorming.
So one thing we do is we've created a leader team and like of volunteers that kind of have ownership over different areas, and they do monthly one-on-ones, even if it's just over the phone, with like key volunteers to just kind of, and it's basically like two-handed approach, like, you know, okay, what's going on, like how can I help you physically, but then also like emotionally, like how are you doing, and like what's been going good, what's not been going good, like, and that has been really, really helpful, because before we started doing that, like that increased our volunteer like sustainability, or they would stay longer whenever there was someone investing in them and like checking on them. It mattered, you know, to them.
Right.
So
Yeah, there is a lot to be said for putting value in refugees, knowing that what they're doing is so valuable, right? Yeah. Any more comments on that?
That's something we want to do. You mentioned doing that. Do you guys, what's the structure that you've been bringing people together to have conversations?
So unlike yourself, even though we're a really small organization as well, our program manager does that as far as connecting with volunteers continually. We have touch points to see where they are. For example, I mean, and all our programs are going to be different and time-based differently and so forth. But for the sake of giving you the example, our new neighbor program is 3 months. So during that 3 months, we have specific touch points that the program manager will literally be in contact with the volunteer. And in so doing, they have opportunities to debrief and so forth, but also build that relationship. So that conversation and dialogue is happening throughout their entire volunteer process. So it's beneficial to us to know what's going on, right? And it's beneficial to the volunteer to have that support while they're experiencing, most often, you know, the new volunteer opportunity that they've taken Did I answer
But you
your
meant,
question?
did you mean the debrief sessions?
The debrief sessions is, we've created an opportunity, and it's called the debrief opportunity, inviting volunteers to come together after maybe 3 months of volunteering, so that they can, as a group, dialogue through specific facilitated questions. It's not an opportunity that we just come together and chat, but it's pretty structured because it could turn into something else, right? So it's really, it's a time for reflection. It's a time for them to write on Post-its, and then everybody, you know, puts their Post-its up next to the questions that I created, and then we read and process all those responses together. So some people's reflections, it might not be coming to the top of their head, but the other volunteer might bring up other, you know, things that are applicable also. So it's really good. It's a really nice opportunity. Through volunteers just talking together, they're realizing that, hey, you're working with Syrians, so am I. Why don't we introduce our families? And then, you know, they're building relationships in that way as well. Yeah.
Well, we have like a advisory council that meets regularly, and I kind of wondered about having volunteers. I haven't done this, but maybe you'll have an idea of whether it's a good idea. Having, you know, the first part of each meeting where I ask a volunteer to come and share personal story, personal reflection, testimony, what have you, to the rest of the group to let them process, but and be validated a bit with the advisory council, the people who are making decisions about.
Yeah, that's great. You might want to implement an evaluation process too, so that volunteers are evaluating their experience with working with refugees and with working with your organization. Always giving yourself, allowing yourself to grow and to benefit from how you're being perceived, right? And the programs. And volunteers are great. I mean, they're out there working with people, so they have firsthand, you know, we should really try this, see if it works, or, you know, just keeping that dialogue and support. And when you implement something that they're suggesting, how valuable is it to them, you know, and to continue on knowing that it's a team, we're working together. As we all know, it does take opening when we're working with refugees and making sure that they're being really well. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. If anybody wants my card, I'd be happy to share that with you. Otherwise, thank you for your time. Thank you.
So are you guys, you're probably not receiving anything right now.
Yes.
Very. I mean, we were up until